My daughter measured my living room while I was in the kitchen, making her coffee. I heard the metal tape snap back 3 times. I poured the water and didn't say anything, which is something I'd gotten very good at by then. My name is Norma Kessler. I'm 66 years old. I live in a house on West Overbluff Drive in Spokane, Washington, the same house my husband Harold and I bought in 1987 for $84,000, 3 bedrooms, a covered back porch, a garden that took Harold 11 years to get right. He died in March of 2020, which is the kind of timing that leaves a person alone in a very quiet house during a very quiet spring. And this past spring, my daughter and her husband decided I was done with it. They didn't ask. They got a real estate agent, a power of attorney, and a listing agreement. And for 9 weeks, strangers walked through my kitchen while I sat at Francis's across the street and counted cars. What nobody told them, what they were so certain they already knew, is what was sitting in a file at the Spokane County Auditor's office for 5 years. Welcome back to Brave Mom Stories, where mothers who were counted out get the last quiet word. Drop a comment and make sure you're subscribed, because this one takes a minute to get to the end, and the end is the whole point. Harold Kessler was a high school history teacher for 34 years. He wore corduroy jackets in 4 colors, and he grew tomatoes badly, and he read everything. He died on a Tuesday morning in March of 2020, 6 days after his diagnosis, in the back bedroom of this house with the window cracked because he'd asked for air. He was 68. I've made coffee for 1 person every morning since, which is a sentence I can say now without stopping in the middle of it. Most mornings. What I used to do for a living, 26 years as a senior loan processor at Inland Community Bank on Division Street. My job was to read every document in a file before it went to underwriting. Disclosures, title commitments, deeds of trust, subordination agreements. I retired in 2019. I was 64. My daughter Diane, at a dinner party in 2022, told her husband's brother that her mom used to work at a bank. "Tell her," she said. "I think front desk." She was 12 when I made assistant processor, 19 when I got my senior designation. I'm not telling you this to make myself sound impressive. I'm telling you because of what it means that she never asked. Diane is 41. She lives in Phoenix with her husband Craig, who works in commercial real estate, and has a habit of walking into any room and immediately looking at the ceiling, appraising it. I noticed him do it at Harold's funeral. He was there 40 minutes before he asked whether I had a mortgage. I told him we'd paid it off in 2011. He smiled and said, "Good to know." That was 4 years ago, and I thought about it more this spring than I ever had before. In January, Diane flew up alone. She brought a carry-on bag and a binder with tabs. She set it on the kitchen table the second morning, after eggs, and she opened it and turned it toward me, the way you turn something toward a person you've already decided about. The first tab was a brochure. Sunridge Estates, Inspired Senior Living, Tucson, Arizona. A woman in a yellow blouse laughing at a Bach ball court. Diane said she and Craig had been looking into options. I asked what the options were for. She looked at the binder instead of at me and said she just worried about me being up here alone. The winters, the house being so much for 1 person. Then she said Craig had some contacts and Sunridge had a wonderful memory care wing if it ever came to that. I was 65 years old. I had driven myself to the dentist the week before. I had filed my own taxes in February. In November, I had caught a billing error in my Medicare Part D and corrected it over the phone in 1 call. But Diane had a binder with tabs, and I asked her if she wanted more coffee. She did. I poured it, and I sat back down, and I asked a question I already had a sense about. Who else have you talked to about this? She turned to the second tab. Craig had found a real estate agent named Dennis. Dennis specialized in what Diane called senior transitions, 2 words that sound like a service and mean a removal. Dennis had already driven by the house. I said, "Has he been inside?" She said, "Not yet." That word, "yet," told me where this was going. Now, before I go further, I want to tell you something I wish I'd heard earlier, because I can already hear the question building. Why didn't she just say no right there? There are two answers. The practical one. In February, I called a woman named Joyce Chambers, an elder law attorney on Riverside Avenue downtown. Sharp, no nonsense, charges in 6-minute increments. I told her everything. She listened. Then she said, "Norma, if you stop this in your kitchen, it stays in your kitchen. If you let it get to paper, it becomes a record. And a record is the only thing that holds up." I said, "I know exactly what a record is." She said, "I thought you might." The second reason is harder to say into a microphone. Every morning that winter, I woke up thinking today is the day Diane calls and says, "Mom, I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself." That's all I wanted. One phone call, one sentence at my door. I would have handed her coffee, and we would never have spoken of it again. I'd have called it a bad season. I hadn't finished hoping yet. In March, Dennis came for what Diane called a walkthrough. He came on a Tuesday while I was at Francis's for coffee. Francis is my neighbor across the street. She's lived there 22 years. She didn't know she was covering for anything. She thought we were just having a nice morning. Dennis told Diane the roof might need attention in the next few years. We redid it in 2018. That was the same wrong fact Diane had given me in January, which told me exactly who his source was as. He photographed the kitchen and Harold's garden, which was still brown from winter. I saw the pictures later in the online listing, and I noticed he'd framed out the raised beds nicely. Harold would have appreciated the angle, even if he'd have hated the reason. On April 3rd, Diane signed the listing agreement. She signed it as attorney. In fact, under a power of attorney I'd executed in 2021 after a minor knee surgery. The kind of document you sign so that someone you trust can manage things if something happens. You sign it because you're going into anesthesia and you want your daughter to be able to pay a bill if she has to. Dennis emailed me a courtesy copy, carbon copied me the way you CC a landlord. I printed it at the Spokane Public Library for 15 cents a page. I read it at my kitchen table with Harold's old Pentel mechanical pencil, the one he used to grade papers. When I retired, the bank gave me a crystal paperweight. I kept the pencil. I underlined one clause on page 4, a reference to the power of attorney, executed and recorded, 2021. Here's what neither of them knew. In the fall of 2021, Craig asked Diane to ask me whether I'd co-sign a business line of credit for a commercial project. He said it would be a formality, a signature. I said no, once and kindly. 3 months later, I got a letter from a lender in Tempe, thanking me for my inquiry about a small business's loan in the amount of $175,000. I had not inquired about anything. He had used the power of attorney I'd signed in 2021. He had put my name on an application I never saw. The loan was declined, something to do with his tax documents, not mine, but the point was made clearly enough. In December of 2021, I drove to the Spokane County Auditor's office, and I recorded a revocation of that power of attorney. Document number 2021-1184720. 3 paragraphs. It says the 2021 power of attorney is revoked in its entirety, and that any person dealing with my property is hereby on notice. I mailed a copy to Diane and Craig, certified mail, return receipt requested, because when you want to be able to prove something later, that's how you say it. The green card came back signed. The handwriting in the delivery box wasn't Diane's. Craig had signed for it himself. He had held that information for 2 years. He signed his own name for it. And then, in April of this year, he handed my daughter a listing agreement and told her to sign as my attorney, in fact, and neither of them stopped to check whether they still had that authority. But there is one more thing, and this is the one that changes everything. In September of 2019, Harold and I sat with an estate planning attorney and transferred this house into a revocable living trust. The Harold and Norma Kessler Family Living Trust, dated September 12, 2019. We were both trustees. When Harold died in 2020, I became the sole trustee. The house has not been in our names as individuals since 2019. It belongs to the trust. and only the trustee can sell trust property. A power of attorney, even a valid one, cannot instruct a trustee to convey. That's not how it works in Washington state or any other state. The trustee acts on behalf of the trust. I am the trustee. The certificate of trust is recorded with Spokane County, document number 2019-891043, available to anyone who types my name into the county assessor's public index. Dennis did not type my name into the county assessor's public index. If you've ever watched something you worked your whole life to build get treated like a checkbox on someone else's spreadsheet, stay with me, because what happens next is the whole reason I'm telling you this. Hit subscribe and don't go anywhere. On May 12th, escrow opened at Meridian Title and closing on North Monroe. The preliminary title report went to Dennis, to the buyer's agent, to the buyers, and to Diane. It also arrived at my mailbox by mail, the way it always does, because the person living in a property has an interest in knowing what's being reported about it. Title companies mail it to the property address as a matter of routine. Nobody did me any favors. I read it that Tuesday evening at the kitchen table with Harold's pencil. Exception 7 referenced a trust instrument recorded September 2019. Property vested in the Harold and Norma Kessler Family Living Trust. Trustee signature required for conveyance. Title cannot be insured without evidence of trust authority. 6 people had received that report before I did. Not one of them had flagged it. Dennis called Diane that same week and said everything was on track. I put the preliminary report in a manila envelope in my hall closet with the certified mail card, the revocation, and a copy of the certificate of trust. I did not call Dennis. I did not call Diane. I went to bed at 10:15 and slept 6 hours, which was more than I expected. My grandson Tyler called me the first week of April when the sign went up. He's 23, finishing a paralegal certificate at a college in Boise. He'd seen Diane's Instagram post. A photo of the front of the house, the listing sign, 3 heart emojis, big changes ahead for Grandma. He called me directly. He said, "Grandma, what is happening?" I told him. He was quiet a moment. Then, "Do you have the trust documents?" I said, "I have 2 copies of everything." He said, "Okay, what do you need from me?" I said, "Nothing yet. Let it get to paper." He said, "You already have a plan." I said, "I have a file." He came over anyway. Sat on the back porch and didn't say much, which is one of the things I like best about him. He looked at Harold's raised beds for a long time. That boy has never once talked about me in the third person while I was standing in the room. The sign was up for 9 weeks. I watched from Francis's porch while 17 groups of people walked through my house. A woman in her 30s stood in my backyard for a long time looking at the raised beds and said something to the man with her, and he nodded and photographed the soil. I was drinking iced tea across the street. I did not cry on that porch, not because I'm strong, because Francis was watching, and by then I understood that everything I did was going to be read as evidence of something. Closing was set for June 14th. The morning of June 14th, I put on the gray blazer I'd worn to Harold's retirement dinner and drove to Meridian Title on North Monroe. I arrived 12 minutes early. I sat at the end of the conference table with my purse in my lap. Diane came in and stopped when she saw me. "You didn't have to come," she said. I said, "I know." Craig came in on his phone. He ended the call, put his hand on the back of my chair, not on me, on the chair, and said, "You doing okay, Mom?" It was the most he'd said to me in 6 weeks. The buyers were a couple named the Harmons, mid-30s, relocating from Oregon. She had a folder with a photo of their dog paper-clipped to the front. They were lovely, and that was the hardest part of the morning. Dennis arrived with 2 pens. The closing coordinator, Sherry, came in with a rolling cart. And then, before Sherry opened a single folder, a second woman came through the side door, younger. Dark blazer, stack of documents with a yellow flag on page 3. She said her name was Andrea from underwriting. She said she needed 5 minutes before anyone signed anything. Craig said, "Is there a problem?" She said, "There's a history. Let me start at the beginning. She read the chain of title the way loan processors read documents, efficiently, without drama. The 1987 grant deed, the 1999 refinance, the 2011 payoff. Then she turned to the yellow flag. September 12, 2019. Document 2019-891043. Harold H. Kessler and Norma Jean Kessler, as grantors, hereby convey to Harold H. Kessler and Norma J. Kessler, as co-trustees of the Harold and Norma Kessler Family Living Trust, dated September 12, 2019. She read the legal description. Craig said, "What does that mean, exactly?" "The property is held in trust," Andrea said. "The listing agreement was executed under a 2021 power of attorney. But a power of attorney cannot direct a trustee to sell trust property. Only the trustee has that authority. And the current sole trustee, as of March 2020, is Mrs. Kessler." Diane said, "Well, she's right here, she can sign." Andrea said, "There's a second item." She turned the page. "The 2021 power of attorney submitted has a recorded revocation. Document 2021-184720, filed December 14, 2021. The revocation names the 2021 instruments specifically and terminates it in full. It has been in the public record for over 2 years." Diane turned and looked at me. Craig said, "That's not right. We have the POA. We've had it the whole time." Andrea said, "The revocation is public record. It's indexed under both your names and has been since December 2021. Craig said, "She didn't tell us." I reached into my purse. I placed one document on the table, the green certified mail card. Postmarked December 2021. Addressed to Craig and Diane Sumner. The signature in the delivery box was in Craig's handwriting. I know it from the loan application he filed in my name. Diane said his name once, just his name. Like a period at the end of a sentence she'd been writing for a while without knowing it. Craig said, "This is vindictive. This is you doing this on purpose." I thought about Harold at his desk in the brown corduroy jacket, grading papers in October. The way he said my name when something surprised him. I thought about his tomatoes that never came in quite right, and his raised beds, and the way he'd looked at this house the day we bought it, like it was something he intended to take care of. I said to Craig, "You signed for the revocation yourself in December of 2021. You've known for 2 years. You just didn't look at what you signed." Andrea said she couldn't clear the title exceptions and could not issue a policy. Without a policy, the lender would not fund. Without funding, there was no closing. The room went quiet in the way conference rooms go quiet when something large and irrevocable has just been said. Everyone looked at me. I straightened the strap of my purse. I stood up. I looked at the Harmons and I told them I was sorry. I meant every word of it. They had done nothing wrong, and they deserved to know that someone in the room understood that. Then I walked out of a conference room in Spokane, Washington, at 10:44 in the morning, past a parking lot still wet from early rain, and I sat in my car for 4 minutes before I could get the key into the ignition. Escrow was terminated that afternoon, withdrawn. The listing came off the MLS the following week. It cannot be relisted without my signature as trustee. That's not a threat. That's just what the paperwork says, and the paperwork doesn't move. I filed a complaint with the Washington State Department of Licensing regarding Dennis. Not because he conspired in anything, but because he listed a property held in trust without verifying how titles was vested, which is something Washington agents are expected to confirm before taking a listing. His principal broker sent a written response. I kept it in the folder. I sent the Harmons a personal check covering their appraisal and inspection costs. They wrote back. They found a house 2 miles away with a bigger backyard. They sent a photo of their dog in the yard. Tyler drove up from Boise the weekend after. He sat on the back porch and we had coffee, and he didn't talk much, which I appreciated. After a while, he said, "Did you know from the beginning how it would go?" I said, "I knew what the record said. The ending was up to them." He nodded and looked at the raised beds. "The tomatoes have been coming in better this summer than they have in years. I've decided that means nothing except decent soil and a wet spring. Diane and I have spoken 3 times since June. Careful, brief conversations. I think she's still sorting out what she knew and when and how much of it she chose to know. I don't know how that arithmetic comes out. I'm willing to wait. Craig has not called. Tyler updated my certificate of trust paperwork last month and made sure everything naming him as successor trustee is current and properly filed. He'll be a good one. He reads past the first page. The house is mine. The garden is here. And every morning I make coffee for one person, which I can say now without stopping in the middle of it. Here's what I want to leave you with, and I'll keep it simple. Go find out what your deed actually says. Go find out whether your property is in a trust and who the trustee is. Go pull a certified copy from your county recorder's office and read it. It costs less than a lunch out. It costs $8 and whatever it takes to find a parking space. They can make every plan in every room they want, but only in the one where someone finally reads the record out loud does any of it stop or start. That's my story. If it made you wonder what's sitting in your own county's index, go find out this week. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.